Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. Happy Thursday. We got some great basketball last night in Mavs Wolves to talk about. Game one, the Mavs steal home court advantage. We're going to talk a little bit about the Cavs making a big move, too. Firing head coach JB Bickerstaff. What does that mean for them moving forward? Chris Paul news, couple of landing spots emerging. My Lakers, maybe. We'll see. All NBA teams get released as well. And as expected, everyone handled that completely responsibly. There were no overreactions whatsoever. Keith, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I do want to address something because I had like 4 different people reach out. I'm not growing a playoff beard. I just have been very lazy over the last few days and haven't shaved. If I was to grow a playoff beard, it may grow in time for like the 2025 playoffs. That's the rate at which facial hair grows. I basically am like a preteen boy with that wispy mustache. I know you were probably had a lot of those when your teacher
Oh,
days
yeah.
back in the day. So yeah, but yeah, I just have been lazy. That's all. But awesome basketball last night. Great game. I assume we'll just start there.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. The Mavericks looked like they were gonna win, then it looked like they were gonna lose, and then they came back and took it. And I think both sides are probably walking away saying, "Man, we can play better than they did in that game." And I think that's going to lead to what should be a really fun and long series. I'm certainly by no means counting Minnesota out after just losing one game. I think they can definitely get back into Dallas and win a game and steal back home court. So I'm still going to stick with Wolves in 7, but I said it, picked Wolves in 7 because I didn't know what else to pick. So I picked the home team in a game 7. And in this series so far, it looks like it may shape up to be a good one.
Yeah, I really liked it. This was a fantastic game. I thought was really interesting in this one was the punching and the counter punching that we saw from both sides. We saw some strategic shifts from both of them. I like that the Wolves eventually started blitzing the pick and roll.
Yes.
It put Derek Lively in some difficult situations and made him into a decision maker, and that presented some problems for the Mavs. But ultimately, the Mavs were able to get it done because Kyrie was great in the first half, and then Luka just started doing his thing, and the Wolves didn't really have an answer. And Keith, we talked about this. The big question going in: can the Mavs defense be on par or close to the Wolves defense? And I thought in last night's game one, the answer was yes. And if that's the case, I'm going to take the Mavs offense over the Wolves offense. And if the defenses are close, that's going to give the edge to Dallas. And I think that's exactly what we saw play out last night.
Yeah, I think what was interesting was there was a lot of after of Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards combined to shoot 12 for 36 from the field. And there was a lot of Wolves fans I saw saying, well, they won't shoot that poorly again. Well, Dallas only shot 6 for 25 from 3. So that's probably not going to repeat either. So I think both teams, again, a lot of things I think they're coming out with saying, all right, we'll be better with that in game 2. And then it's going to be, will they or not? My one disappointing thing with Anthony Edwards was some of this was Dallas's defense. Some of this was him. He took 12 3-pointers out of his 16 attempts last night. He's a good 3-point shooter, but get inside, attack the basket a little bit more. I would have liked to see that. When he did attack inside, he generally made the right play, but he had a lot to attack to pass versus attack to score there. So that's I think an immediate tweak. I thought their Kyle Anderson minutes they got were great. In a lot of ways, I thought he was one of the best defenders they had on Luka because he has the size to bang with Luka and take those bumps that Luka gives him. But it's also that's maybe the one player in the league who's not going to just blow by Kyle Anderson either because they're about the same foot speed, which is only slightly faster than me probably at this point. But that's only because they're both worn down from a long season. When we hit training camp, they're way faster than me. But at this point, I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit there. But I think, and then on the Dallas side, hey, I've seen some people screaming, they got to play Lively more. He was way better than Daniel Gafford. Not that he wasn't better than Daniel Gafford, not that Lively wasn't very good. I think it just was Gafford was on the floor when the Wolves hit shots and Lively wasn't. And I know some of that is Lively created, but a lot of these were just open jump shots that missed that really didn't have much to do with the big men. But I thought Lively, other than a couple weird spots as a passer, like you said, when they started blitzing the ball handler, I thought Lively played a great game. He's so
Yeah.
good. In maybe Gafford starts next year too. We'll see. But when Lively's ready to start, man, you gave Luka that running mate at the big position. That'll be for as long as he's in Dallas. Like that's going to be his guy. And then Luka just gets to his spots, makes things happen. Kyrie had a bunch of plays. He made some big plays late in the game too. I thought the Wolves had a really hard time covering him off the dribble, especially when they took Alexander Walker out of the game. So that's going to be something that'll probably be an adjustment. But man, what a fun game.
Yeah, absolutely. Lively finishes a plus 19 and plus minus, which is not everything. We talk about that a lot. That's not everything in terms of the stats, but minus 15 for Daniel Gafford. But I do think that's part of what you're talking about in terms of one player was just on the floor while they were, happened to be hitting shots. Lively was great. 9 points, 11 boards, 3 assists, 2 blocks, just 1 turnover despite getting blitzed. He got put in some shaky spots where the play was disrupted. He didn't necessarily turn the ball over, but still you can see the play was disrupted when they tried to make him a decision maker. But I do think there's an issue if you just look at the box score and you just say, oh, Gafford is minus 15, Lively is plus 19. Clearly, play Lively more minutes. Lively played 27 minutes. Gafford played 21, which, by the way, that's one of the things I love about this Mavs roster construction is that you've got 48 minutes of 2 similar style bigs, just long, lanky, catch and finish, rim runner type bigs. You've got 48 minutes of that on the floor. So there's that consistency in terms of how you can play minute to minute. It's not, okay, here comes the second unit and there's a totally different style of big that we're throwing in and everything has to get shifted. It's good to have that option, but I do like the Mavs can have consistency across 48 minutes with these two guys. I will say the idea of just playing Lively more minutes, let's say you play him 35 minutes. You take a few more minutes away from Gafford. You play him 40 minutes because it's the playoffs. You only give 8 minutes to Gafford. I think there's going to be diminishing returns because one of the things that Lively does so well is he plays with such a high motor. He's all over the place. He's attacking the basket for tip dunks and things of that nature. You start getting up into the mid 30s and so in minutes, he's going to start wearing down. And that's something where you probably get less out of him by playing him longer minutes than if you're able to sub in Gafford and kind of let them tag team that center position. So I think it's too early to be out on Daniel Gafford and make that shift. Lively was great, but I think both guys are going to have opportunities to really prove themselves this series.
And both guys, too, can play very free defensively. They can challenge shots. They can go out, try to get after guys because they know, hey, if I pick up a couple fouls, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. Lively only had 1 foul in this game, but there's been other games where he's committed like 4 fouls, and we talked about it a lot on yesterday's show, where sometimes you're not committing fouls because you're not playing any defense. He's committing fouls because he's playing defense, but it's because he knows I only really going to give the team 25 minutes or so in that range. I can be super aggressive. I can go out there and do that because there is the other guy. Then there's been a little bit of buzz that maybe Maxi Kleba could return in this series, maybe could return in the finals. And that's the change up, like you talked about. That's where you can throw a completely different look. Now we have a stretch 5 out there, another guy, a guy who can step out and shoot it. It just gives you a different thing to prepare for. So they get him back, man, you get those guys. And then honestly, Dwight Powell is like your 4th option as a center. That's pretty good. Like you're living pretty good at one position when you're in that spot, especially against a team like the Wolves who can play any one of 3 options at the center spot and probably feel incredible about it because how good Towns, Gobert, and Reed are. So interesting look there. One other wrinkle that Jason Kidd made in the Thunder series, and it's now carried over at least into game 1 of this, going to Jaden Hardy as the backup primary ball handler.
He was good
for moments. He was very good. And that's great for right now, but that's huge moving forward for the Mavericks. Because if the Mavericks look at it and say, Jaden Hardy can kind of be a third guard for us, that just changes a lot of things you could do as the way you build out that roster. Because he can play with Luka, can play with Kyrie, or if needed, can run the offense by himself when he's out there. So his leveling up passing at this point in the year, deep into the playoffs, that's huge. That's going to, I think, have major like positive ramifications for Dallas as we get into next year and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a bright spot for them in just 9 minutes. He was able to make a difference with 4 assists. Kate, the last thing I want to touch upon with this game, what we saw so far, is it's interesting how both sides took the other side into a space that they aren't normally comfortable. So, for example, the Dallas Mavericks on the season, they rank second in the NBA in 3-point attempts. And yet in this game, they took just 25
Yeah.
threes. On the season, they averaged 40 threes per game in the regular season. They took just 25 and they shot terribly from three, 24%. So if you're the Mavs, you're a 37% on the season 3-point shooting team. You're going, man, we won this game and we can shoot a lot better than this. We can certainly shoot better here. But I thought it was interesting that the Wolves were able to keep the Mavs from just casting away from three, and the Mavs were ultimately able to adjust and get some scoring in the paint. And then on the flip side, the Wolves wound up taking way more threes than they typically do. They are in the bottom third in the NBA in 3-point attempts, shoot 33, and I'm rounding up to get there per game. They took almost 50, 49 3-point attempts, and they shot them at a decent clip, 37%. Yeah. Some of that certainly is Anthony Edwards taking 12 threes. You also had Karl-Anthony Towns taking 9 threes, 9 from McDaniels. But again, when we're looking at defensively, how good both these sides are, I think it's really evident in that the Mavs had to play a style that's different than what they typically would do in terms of those threes that they would normally go for being taken away. And then the inverse happening to the Wolves, where they were forced to take more threes than they are typically comfortable with. So again, I think that speaks not so much to how teams are as a shooter or what their offenses are. It speaks to how good these defenses are, because they recognized what the other team wants to do and did what they could to force them to do something else.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at one point. Dallas, I want to say going into the fourth quarter, had 60 points in the paint. You don't normally think about that with the Wolves, with all that size and length down there and all those big defenders, but they really did a good job breaking them down, getting down in there inside 4 baskets. I think the other thing that was interesting for Dallas, PJ Washington had a pretty bad offensive game.
Yes.
I thought he was really good defensively. That's some of the best defense I've ever seen him play. I thought he did a really nice job against both Towns and Gobert, either one of them that he was asked to guard at times. I don't remember him being out there a lot with Naz Reid, so I don't remember him picking him up as much, but he did a nice job kind of bodying up those guys. And I thought especially against Towns, he did a good job kind of pushing Towns out about 2 to 3 extra steps when Towns was trying to get him in the mid-post area. And then he did a nice job moving his feet, staying in front of him. So really important game out of him, even though he wasn't making shots. And if you told me 6 months ago that PJ Washington would have a terrible offensive game in the Western Conference Finals and still be a big part of why his team won, I would be utterly confused, because this was a guy who with Charlotte played no defense the last couple of seasons because nobody on the team bothered to play any defense, and yet here he was making big plays. So good to see that from the Dallas side too.
All right. Well, I think we've got two very evenly matched sides here, and it's now on the Wolves to bounce back at home and win game 2. We'll see if they can do that. All right, let's get into the big news of the morning. The Cavs did decide, as we kind of had a sense this was the way it was going to go, but they did fire JB Bickerstaff, which means they are now on the coaching market. Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, 2 early candidates that they are rumored to be looking at. This is going to be interesting because now they become, the Washington Wizards aren't really seen as necessarily a competitor for the Lakers. So now you have 2 teams in the Lakers and the Cavs that are both going to be competing in a very shallow pool of free agent coaches. And I'm curious to see if either side speeds the other one up. Like, I very much think the Suns went out and said, Coach Bud, you are our guy, Mike Budenholzer. We're not even bothering interviewing anybody else, in part because the Lakers were out there, right? Because you've got some competition. They went, let's get this done and be finished with it. I'm curious to see, how do the Lakers react to this? How do the Cavs act, knowing that there is a direct competitor on the market?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And Borrego is kind of the crossover candidate that we know about, at least right now. And sometimes too, it's the candidates you're not hearing about that maybe a team interviewed. Every once in a while, a hire comes out of nowhere, and you're like, wait, we didn't even get any reports they met with that guy. And sometimes that's by intent, right? It was, we don't want you to know we're interested in Coach X. But I think that is really interesting there. So that is one where it's Mark Stein reported that the Lakers which I think is we've seen it. they don't have like a clear cut, this is the guy we want. They're still very much in the process of trying to identify it. But let's just say it was James Borrego. Well, now you do have competition for him. So if you want to move on him, maybe you need to move a little quicker, as you said. I thought Atkinson's interesting. We haven't really heard much since he turned down the Hornets job after getting it and then said, you know what, I'm going to stay here with the Warriors. We haven't heard his name mentioned too often beyond, I think, just speculation of, oh, he's a good coach. But I thought it was interesting how they referenced he did really well with Jared Allen and Karis LeVert with Brooklyn when he had them there as their coach. Maybe Jared Allen's not necessarily on the move if they go with Kenny Atkinson, because that's been heavily speculated that they may move him. It may not mean anything, and they may be like, they did a nice job with him, but that doesn't. They're not tied together by any means, and off we go. So I think, I am curious now to see if this picks up the pace a little bit on everybody. And you mentioned Washington. Yeah, they're still looking for a coach, but that's a different world. They're not necessarily going after the same guys. They're more of a different type of candidate that they're looking to identify. Is they're just in a completely different spot from the Lakers and Cavs, who are both trying to win.
Was this the correct decision for the Cavs to move on from JB Bickerstaff? Was it time for them to make that kind of shift? Like, he had some fans in Cleveland, but is this just the easiest thing to do, is to move on from the coach, or is this really what they needed to do in order to move this team forward?
Yeah, I mean, it is the easiest thing to do, right? I think we know that. I am wondering with this one is, where are we from a standpoint of, did he lose the locker room? I guess that's the best way to put it. If he's lost the locker room, yes, it's then you have to move on. Coaches, they don't get the locker room back unless it was literally, I lost one player in that locker room and the team moves on from that one player, then that's a little different. But yeah, I think we're just in a spot where it is a little of a, I don't know. I thought he did a nice job with this team. I thought he did a good job kind of shepherding from bad team to, we were competitive, then we made the playoffs, then we won a playoff series. I thought he did a nice job against the Celtics, all things considered. By the end, he was down multiple starters and guys were out, and they were missing Karis LeVert as well, key reserves. So I thought he did okay. I just, if you feel like we've gone as far as he can take us, then it is the right move to make the change. I don't know. I feel like that was a little bit of I feel like you get dealt a tough hand a little bit there.
I wonder, is there a Donovan Mitchell factor in this? We know the Cavs want to keep him. We know they're going to give him an extension. Is this, what is Donovan Mitchell's influence within the organization? Does he get asked on stuff like this, on, hey, do you want us to move on? Or is this, proof, hey, we're going to go out there and try to get the best coach we can, and we're going to try to move this team forward, and we're going to make sure you're not in this position again? Because we know Mitchell badly wants to win. I do wonder how much of a factor Mitchell's free agency or potential free agency next summer could be. I know they want him to sign that extension, if that's a factor at all in this decision to move on from JB Bickerstaff. But the Cavs, again, they're going to be out there in the market. They're going to try to find a coach that can help them win right now. Keith, I did notice, and I'm not trying to look for any kind of I'm not trying to read the tea leaves too much here, but it is interesting that the early names that have come out, JJ Redick is not among them. I wonder why that may be.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling on it, and I've said this before, if we're weeks from now and the Lakers still haven't hired a coach, then maybe we're in a spot where it becomes how do I put this? You can really ramp up the speculation that it's JJ Redick. Because then maybe they are just waiting for the finals to be over. So that way there's some unwritten agreement with ESPN of, hey, we'll delay. So I really don't know, where that goes.
Sure. All right, let's get to the all NBA teams, which again, everybody was, no one overreacted to. Everyone handled it very responsibly, as usual. We've got the all NBA teams, the first five. You've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Luka, Giannis, and Tatum rounding out the top five. You can see the voting there on your screen. The second team, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis. Third team, LeBron, Steph Curry, Sabonis, Tyrese Halliburton, and Devin Booker. Keith, we talked about it when we went over the Defensive Player of the Year voting. Someone out there really loves Sabonis because he got somebody's first team vote. I was surprised to see that. I would imagine it's the same person that voted him Defensive Player of the Year.
May very well be. I mean, I don't know. Maybe does his dad have a legacy vote or something? Maybe
Right.
that's what it is. I don't know, but yeah, the defense stuff is insane. Like that's just nonsense. I don't have a problem with him making all NBA team. I thought it was ridiculous he didn't make the All-Star team. When that happened, I said that on the show here. I had him as an All-Star. I think people right now have made him the poster child for he can't do X, Y, and Z with skipping all of the great things he does do and can do. I think it's become kind of silly where it's like it would be like going to the top and being like, well, Giannis isn't a 45% 3-point shooter and just harping on that all the time. Like that's what are we doing, right? Like that's not we're not going to get there. So yeah, I also think it was kind of interesting. I think the voters positionless. They pretty much voted by positions here.
They really did.
Until you got to the third team, right? That was the only one where we kind of put 3 guards on there. But every team has a center on it. Every team has a couple guards. Every team has a couple forwards. Like we're there now. Joel Embiid wasn't eligible, so where would he have landed out? If he had played enough, obviously he might have won MVP. So I would assume he would have been on the first team. But so far, year one of this, team's looking an awful lot like they might have looked, in prior years as far as the positions go.
Now we've seen a few guys make some extra money here. Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, they get an extra, $40 million. Now, isn't that it's on the 5th year of their deals? How does that factor in if they're like, let's say they get 3-4 years in and then they decide they're going to extend? Is that math still accurate?
Well, they don't have options. Neither one of them has a player option. They are just on 5 years. So what happens is they bump from the 25% tier to the 30% tier. So they get a bump of I don't know why I'm going to just speculate. I can just look and tell you. That is about it's a little over 7 million more in year one. And then over the course with the 8% raises, that works out to about 40 million in total. Over the course of the life of the 5-year deal. Both of them, I've seen some people say, well, maybe they had the language that only took it to 28% of the cap because they made, especially for like Halliburton, made third team. They didn't. They were the 30% or none. So it was just as long as they made a team, they were getting 30%. Both of them. I can confirm that. I know that's what the case is. So they're both going to get that full 30% max, jump up a tier, and they get that. Sabonis earned a $1.3 million bonus from this. That was already factored in because he had already he had that last year. So no like changing his cap hit or anything like that. And then probably the ones that stand out the most, Jaylen Brown, who was the first guy out, if you will. He had the most votes of the non people to make it. He missed out on a bonus, but if the Celtics make the finals, that also gets him his full bonus anyway. So he's probably, in my opinion, going to land there anyway.
Yeah.
And there's other triggers that have him most of the way to his max bonus as it is anyway. And then Tyrese Maxey not getting named All-NBA. He is now eligible for a 25% of the cap max this summer. And now I saw this where some people said, oh, great, now Philly has more money to spend. They don't. His cap hold stays what it is anyway.
It's the same.
And it's about 13 million. It's just how much he'll get after. How you're going to see this sequenced is you may see the tweet of Maxey and the Sixers agree to 5-year maximum deal at X amount of dollars. And then functionally, though, when they actually sequence the transactions, that'll be one of the later moves after they've used their cap space because they're going to use his small cap hold. Because once he signs, his new salary replaces the cap hold. So that's just the game they've been playing for basically a year now. They knew a year ago this is where we want to go. They got Maxey to buy into it, and everybody agreed, and off we go. So we're in a good place with him, I think. Anyway, despite not making it, and I think it's probably fair. Nobody jumped out on those teams, or I'm like, oh my gosh, what a horrible decision for any of them. I think those were probably, with the new eligibility rules, the 15 best guys in the league this year.
Right. Yeah. Again, when you add in those eligibility rules, certainly important that we look at that, because that obviously would have changed things with Embiid, with maybe some other guys too. Okay, so that was all NBA. We've got one more thing we need to get into here. Chris Paul and some things. I believe this was from Mark Stein. Have him linked to the Spurs and the Lakers, two teams that we've talked about. He was almost a Laker like over a decade ago, and that obviously didn't happen infamously. The Spurs are also a team that you and I have talked about that would make a lot of sense. Just, hey, go throw some lobs for Victor Wembanyama for a year. Be the bridge guard for whoever we bring in as a young point guard. Be somebody that can teach the next guy, the next generation, and off you go with something like that. So I think there's two really interesting landing spots. He's got family in LA, but this is all assuming that the Warriors are going to cut him loose. Is that it? Do you see any path where they don't do that?
Stein calls out there is a world where they agree to push back the guarantee date. Whatever date they agree, they push it all the way back to the middle of January, which is when all contracts guarantee if they wanted to. That's probably not going to happen. But I tend to believe the Warriors. I'm going to take Warriors ownership at their word of we need to reduce our payroll this year. If they hadn't said that, I thought what they would do is guarantee Chris Paul's $30 million and find a trade where they stay a second apron team, but they bring in a player who makes $30 million or less as kind of, this is how we're going to rebound. It's almost like what they did with D'Angelo Russell, right? It was, we're losing Kevin Durant for nothing. Let's replace the salary slot with D'Angelo Russell. We'll make that a double sign and trade. Then a year in, let's trade him because we think Andrew Wiggins is a better fit for us. Ultimately, that proved prophetic because he was huge for them in winning the 2022 title. So I think there is a world where that could have been the plan, but they have been so adamant that they are going to do what they can to, at the very least, get under the first and second aprons, but maybe ideally all the way out of the tax entirely. I'm going to take them at their word and say, I think Chris Paul gets waived unless there is some really crazy trade that pops up that they're just like, we can't pass it up. We have to make this deal. And that doesn't mean it's a trade for Chris Paul. That may be a trade for something else where Chris Paul is just the primary mechanism to get them there. But yeah, I'm interested. I think the Lakers make sense. There's a world where the Lakers may start next year needing a 25-minute a night point guard. And I think Chris Paul can still do that and be just fine in that position. And then I think, obviously, as you said, with the Spurs, that one makes a lot of sense. Again, probably a 25-minute a night point guard just to kind of mentor somebody else who's really going to be Wembanyama's running mate long term. And there we go with that. But I don't know. I don't think Chris Paul is done. I don't think he's with the Warriors next year, and I think he will get waived when all is said and done. Because I just don't see a trade materializing that we're not seeing right now.
Yeah, especially if those are the salary constraints that the Warriors are looking at. They're trying to shed salary that is most likely he's going to wind up getting waived. But the Spurs, the Lakers too. I'm sure there'll be other teams that are interested in him as well. But those are some interesting landing spots to kick things off with him. And of course, we've got a lot of other things going on this summer that we're going to be keeping an eye on. There's going to be a lot of trades, a lot of transactions, of course, the draft, free agency, all of that, of course, to say, make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office Show on YouTube. Follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And don't forget to check out the Basketball Bulletin, basketballbulletin.substack.com. Until next time, everybody.
Sorry, I just want to make a very quick point.
Please do.
I'd like to get the Apple reviews. Let's get that up to 300. We're not that far off. So let's, if you guys wouldn't mind popping in there and leaving a rating and review, I'd like to see that climb a little bit there. I know a lot of people are now seeing the show daily on YouTube, but a lot of people still listen. Ideally, you would do both, right? There's no reason why you can't watch on YouTube, like and share on YouTube, and then watch and listen, or not watch, but listen on Apple, or at least download. As long as you listen somewhere, we're okay. But at least listen on Apple or download it and go. But if you guys can help out there, I'd like it. We've been sitting like pretty close, and it's like, let's just nudge over that. And it really does help, because when you get a flood of reviews, it pushes us up. More people will find the show, and that's just better for us. It allows us to make better content. And for everybody who complains about my mic and all that stuff, you help us out. Maybe we'll get a little more cash and I buy a new one. And
there you go.
There we go.
All right. That's a good point there. Get those Apple Podcast reviews up, everybody. We certainly do appreciate you. Till next time. Oh, fun Friday tomorrow.
Yeah.
Let's go. Front Office Friday. That's going to be a good time. We'll have that coming up tomorrow. We'll put our time out there on social, and we'll get that off and going to kick off the weekend. All right, everybody. Till then, see ya and stay safe.